Deep in the heart of the great temple, the obsidian archway stood as a silent sentinel of a forgotten era. Master Seti, a man of profound wisdom, with deep, dark skin etched with the lines of many suns, stood beside young Amose. They were draped in the finest white linen, their gold pectoral plates catching the dying embers of the braziers. "Observe, Amose," Seti whispered, his voice like the shifting sands of the desert. This was no mere stone. It was a boundary, a threshold between the pulse of the Nile and the rhythm of the stars. The air was heavy, thick with the anticipation of a storm that had been brewing for millennia. Around them, the majestic sandstone walls were inscribed with hieroglyphs that seemed to hum in the silence. The great pyramids loomed in the distance beyond the temple gates, bathed in the golden hour's last embrace. But here, in the shadows, a different power was stirring. They waited, two figures of ancient dignity, as the very fabric of reality began to stretch and groan. The silence was not an absence of sound, but a gathering of energy, a coiled serpent ready to strike at the heart of the mortal world.
Suddenly, the obsidian grew fluid, its dark surface rippling like the Nile at dusk. Then, with a sound like 1,000 sighs, it erupted into a swirling vortex of indigo and starlight. This was the breach, the opening of the way. The indigo hues were so deep they seemed to pull at the soul, while the starlight within danced with a fierce, cold fire. It was as if a piece of the night sky had been torn from the heavens and grafted onto the temple floor. The intensity of the light was blinding, yet it did not burn. It was a celestial radiance that defied the laws of the sun. Cora watched from the shadows, her breath catching as the portal expanded, its edges crackling with cosmic energy. The majestic ancient Egyptian epic was unfolding before their eyes, a spectacle of magic and might that few would ever witness. The vortex hummed, a low frequency that vibrated through the stone and into the very marrow of their bones. It was a bridge to the infinite, a doorway to the divine, and the journey had only just begun. The indigo light reflected off their golden jewelry, casting long, otherworldly shadows against the ancient pillars.
As the vortex stabilized, a sudden gust of wind swept through the hall, carrying the sharp scent of ozone mingled with the rich, earthy smell of river silt. It was a paradox, the breath of the cosmos and the scent of the earth combined. The wind was so powerful it extinguished the remaining braziers in a single, unified puff of smoke. The warm orange glow of the fire was instantly replaced by the cold, penetrating brilliance of the celestial radiance. The transition was jarring, a shift from the familiar warmth of the temple to the alien coldness of the stars. Master Seti stood firm, his dark skin glowing under the indigo light, his expression one of reverence and awe. The golden hour outside was forgotten as the interior of the temple became a realm of pure energy. Every detail of their ornate linen and gold jewelry was highlighted by this new light, revealing the exquisite craftsmanship of their ancestors. The air itself seemed to vibrate, a symphony of cosmic forces clashing and harmonizing. They were no longer just men in a temple. They were witnesses to the restructuring of existence itself, standing at the precipice of the unknown.
Then, gravity itself began to fail. It started with a tremor, a subtle shift in the weight of things. Small fragments of sandstone, broken from the ancient walls by the sheer force of the portal, began to drift upward. They spun slowly in the air, caught in the invisible currents of the warping reality. Almost gasped, reaching out a hand as a piece of stone floated past his face, its rough texture illuminated by the starlight. The floor beneath them felt unsteady, as if the very foundations of the temple were dissolving into the ether. This was the magical feedback, a physical manifestation of the breach between realms. The majestic setting of the great temple was being transformed into a weightless sanctuary. The sense of scale was overwhelming. The heavy stone pillars seemed light as feathers, and the vast hall felt both infinite and intimate. Cora observed the way the light caught the floating debris, creating a constellation of terrestrial fragments dancing in a celestial void. It was a beautiful, terrifying display of power, a reminder that the laws of man were nothing compared to the will of the gods. The golden jewelry on their necks felt light, no longer tethered by the Earth's pull.
Within the swirling depths of the portal, the view began to clear, revealing a landscape that defied mortal comprehension. Impossible geometries shifted and collapsed in a mesmerizing dance of light and shadow. Beyond the indigo veil lay pyramids not of stone, but of pure crystalline light. They stood beneath an alien sky, a horizon of deep purples and vibrant violets, where stars burned with a steady, unblinking intensity. This was the realm of the infinite, the source of all magic and life. The light from these celestial pyramids was so bright it seemed to pierce through the eyes and into the mind. Master Seti moved closer, his figure silhouetted against the brilliant backdrop. He gestured toward the vista, his hands steady despite the deafening roar of cosmic vibrations that now filled the hall. "Look, but do not look too deeply," he cautioned. The majesty of the scene was beyond words, a cinematic 8K vision of a world where thought and matter were one. The ancient Egyptian epic had reached its zenith, showing them the true face of the divine. Every pulse of light from the alien sun echoed the heartbeat of the universe, a rhythm both ancient and new.
Master Seti turned to Amose, his voice barely audible over the cosmic roar, yet filled with an undeniable authority. "Keep your eyes lowered, my son, but do not close them," he instructed. "To close them is to fear the gift, but to stare directly is to be consumed by it. Witness the privilege of the divine with humility." Amose nodded, his young face a mask of concentration and terror. He looked down at the floating sandstone at his feet, watching the reflections of the celestial pyramids in the polished gold of his bracelets. The master's guidance was his only anchor in this storm of light and sound. Seti's dark skin was bathed in the indigo glow, making him look like a god himself, a pharaoh of the stars. They stood together, the teacher and the student, at the very edge of the mortal realm. The sun-drenched golden hour of the world outside was a distant memory, replaced by the eternal, shimmering light of the portal. The weight of history and the promise of the future converged in this single moment of instruction. It was a lesson in perception, a teaching on how to stand before the infinite without losing one's soul to the vastness of the light.
The final stage of the transition was a sensory onslaught. The magical feedback reached a crescendo, a deafening roar of cosmic vibrations that seemed to harmonize with the very atoms of their bodies. It was the sound of creation and destruction occurring simultaneously. The obsidian archway was no longer a doorway. It was a living, breathing entity, a conduit for the raw power of the universe. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and the weight of the divine. Master Seti and Amose were now fully immersed in the radiance, their white linens glowing like the sun-drenched desert outside. The Great Sphinx and the pyramids of Giza, though miles away, seemed to resonate with the power emanating from the temple. This was the culmination of their journey, the moment where the ancient Egyptian epic met the infinite. As the roar intensified, the boundaries between the temple and the alien realm blurred until they were one. They stood at the threshold, ready to step into the light, their hearts beating in time with the cosmic pulse. The journey into the infinite was no longer a possibility, it was an inevitability, a majestic descent into the heart of the stars.